Hmm.
Yep. Namaskar, everyone. Welcome to our Niti Shastra channel. Today, I have my friend come partner in Niti Shastra, Himja Parekh, along with me for discussion on the geopolitical events which have happened over last 15, 20 days, 1 month, and a lot has happened over there. So, first of all, let me welcome Himja. It's great to have you over here.
Good evening. Very happy to be here.
Yep,
We've
I
been
know.
meaning to do this podcast for quite
Age,
some time, and
yeah.
today is the day.
Yeah, ages actually. Okay. So, Himja, we have been discussing a lot, like what happened in last 15, 20 days. Last 1 month, actually, from April onwards, for ever since the tariff
Yes,
thing started, and then the Indo-Pak thing, and then so many events, Russia, Ukraine, it's been crazy. So I thought,
yes,
like finally, let's do a podcast where we combine it for our people who follow us, right? Okay.
yes. I think India has become the talking point of many countries. Some of them are very upset. A lot of
Yeah,
them are
yeah,
happy.
yeah,
It's been an
totally.
interesting time.
Yeah, very interesting time. Totally. Okay. So let me first give a brief of like what has happened in last 1 week, and then I want your opinion on it. Okay. The first thing, let's talk about Operation Sindoor. So,
Hmm.
we had that dastardly attack in Pahalgam where almost 26, around 26 civilians unarmed civilians were killed, tourists basically, in that
Yes,
beautiful meadow of Pahalgam where they, by terrorists based on religious profile, where, Hindu males. And then we had the government of India, take a very stern stand against Pakistan from abrogating Indus Water Treaty to
sorry.
to launching Operation Sindoor, in which what we saw that on the 7th of May, early morning 7th of May 2025, the government of India launched, along with the armed forces, launched a targeted strikes on Pakistan's terror network in the virtually the heart of Pakistani Punjab, from
Yes.
Bahawalpur to Muridke to Kotli to Skardu, like along 9 places on the headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed and on the, what you say, Lashkar-e-Taiba. So,
Bawalpur because of Jaish,
yeah,
and also I think a couple of attacks which were very close to the Pakistani military establishments, their bases, just to prove a point. And I think it's been a long time coming.
yep, they were a long time coming indeed. So, now how we've seen the kind of armory that was used, the drone warfare we saw where the Turkish
Yeah,
drones were deployed. We saw how Chinese missiles and Chinese radars were used, PL-15,
yeah,
HQ-9
yeah,
batteries, and in the in
yeah.
between we had all other stuff going on where we had IMF loans being dispersed. So we'll come to that geopolitical bit part of in a bit. But how do you view Operation Sindoor? Basically, like your basic opinion. How would you frame it? How well has the government of India performed? Could they have gone further, or is it enough as a deterrence? What's your viewpoint?
So I think in terms of military capabilities, of course it was we managed to do something that got the whole world talking. So from that point of view, I don't think there is ever even any doubt about what we were able to achieve. Um, like you said, and I think the statement of yours has gone viral, that how many nuclear powers have hit 11 air bases of another nuclear power in modern times. I think that one tweet is, it sums up what has actually happened. And the fact that we didn't just do this at the LOC, we did this in the heart of Pakistan. So we basically told them that we are upping the ante, we are changing our method of deterrence, which was very important. So it's been a
Absolutely.
long time coming, like I said. But sorry, but I think for me, the biggest takeaway, and of course, there are a lot of these global military analysts, they're talking about what we did, how our how our weapon systems were able to do full of the impossible. They were able to circumvent, destroy Chinese radars. There is talk of us having taken down an AVAC, I think, which the army has confirmed. There is also talk of having hit other very, very high-tech jets, some of which are not being disclosed, some of which are being disclosed. But for me, I think the biggest and the most important uh, takeaway from this has been the Indian military complex. I mean, for me, that is the most important achievement that we have managed to show. Like the little Indian lion, the baby cub is now beginning to find its roar. And I think
Absolutely.
that's commendable because
True.
we wrote about this in our book in 2016 and said it is very, very important. No nation can become a significant power and expect a seat at the global table without an indigenous military complex. It is very, very important. Otherwise, you are always going to be dependent on other countries. You're going to be at their mercy, and they can treat you, the way they want to. Which is why for India, this was always very important because also, our position that we are neighbors with China, we have a long-standing military relationship with Russia. And in the recent past, a lot of our purchases were towards the United States. So that was putting us in a very complicated situation. And of course, we've traditionally had a history of a lot of import of weapons for various reasons. I mean, we're not going to discuss that right now. So
Correct.
this time, seeing the combination of what we were able to do and the fact that a lot of our machinery that was not Indian, the way we managed to bring our Indian agencies with the Western or the Russian machinery and just integrate them beautifully to create our own setup. And of course, the other brilliant projects that are in the pipeline, some of which have been announced, some of which haven't been announced. It's a very, very exciting, it's a very, very exciting thing.
Correct.
And yeah, I think for me, that has been the biggest takeaway. I mean, there is no greater beauty than watching the BrahMos take out the airbase.
Absolutely.
There is
I
nothing more beautiful than that.
I totally agree. I totally agree to what you said. And to let me just expand on what you just opined. Okay.
Please.
Yeah. So when like Operation Sindoor, for all the listeners, is one of that that every country requires that Pearl Harbor kind of a movement, right? Where
Yes.
it invigorates the whole country together, it invigorates the military together, it
Yes.
strengthens your national resolve. So I think
The rallying point.
the rallying point, like 2000, like Mumbai 2611 was one rallying point, right? But we missed that
Yes.
opportunity because the government at that time, for XYZ reason, did not take it to
Yeah.
the logical.
Political will was missing.
Yes, true that. So
Hmm.
now, this time, I think that resolve has been shown. And how beautifully, even the opposition, like that the government is deployed opposition MPs like Shashi Tharoor as well to go to United States, go to foreign media,
Hmm.
and put out the Indian point of view forward. I think which has been the most hallmark, the whole country, cutting across party lines was united this time, right?
Of course. Of course. I think there is there is a lot to learn from your friends as well as your enemies. So, I mean, since India is a democracy, we only have another example of another democracy, which is the United States, which is supposedly our ally, but of course, it's a very complicated relationship. But the one thing that the United States does have is whether it's Democrat or Republican, as we have discussed this repeatedly, that foreign policy to a great extent remains unchanged. So that is very, very important. Like just like in India, this time around, it has been wonderful to see the entire government, whether they are in power or the opposition, come together when it really matters. Because that is very, very important. It is necessary to present a united front. There will be a time for differences. There will be, you can debate on internal policy, you can debate on internal governance and all of that. And that is all right. But as far as your strategic interests are concerned, your national interest is concerned, your sovereignty is concerned, there should be absolutely no room for compromise.
Absolutely. So, coming to the Indian MIC and how it impacts Operation Sindoor. So,
Yes,
like we've written today itself, like how, one, this was a very different operation from Balakot. It was very multifaceted. It had an economic, a water impact, it had military
yes,
impact. Then we stuck 11 Pakistani air bases: Noor Khan, Rafiki, Murid, Suku, Sialkot, Parasur, Chunian, Sargoda, Skardu, Bholari, and Jacobabad. And it
yes,
nearly took out 20% of Pakistan's Air Force infrastructure, hitting their hangars, destroying one of their AWACS, Saab
yes,
2000 AWACS at Bholari hangar,
yes,
and
yes.
then and probably downing even two JF-17 jet, what we've been hearing. Within a
Hmm.
span of 90 minutes in the early morning, and today Pakistan's Prime Minister, now Sabah Sharif
Hmm.
himself was saying, that General Munir called me at 2:30 in the morning that Wazir-e-Azam India has launched ballistic missiles, and one has
Hmm.
landed at Noor Khan base. Basically the Pakistani Prime Minister confirmed that we hit them hard, and within a span of 90 minutes. And why Noor Khan is 11 bases were hit, and why Noor Khan was important, because it holds the nuclear command of Pakistan. Now
Yes.
imagine, hitting at the Noor Khan base, hitting at the Sargoda base near Kirana Hill, where you have
Yes.
your weapons system, nuclear weapons stored, right? And that taking out that, and the beauty of it is that today it was revealed that DRDO sent decoy aircrafts as MiGs
Hmm.
and Sukhois, to which the Pakistani air system responded. So
Yes. So
we got to know that
the, the
air
system was
defense.
exposed.
Yep,
The
exactly.
system was exposed.
and
Yes.
then we sent on those BrahMos then we sent on those loitering drones with loitering munition to take those defense systems down, and finally it followed with BrahMos systems to go in and hit them hard on those air bases.
Absolutely. But Pakistan has been perpetually playing the we are a nuclear power card whenever they get cornered. So I think there is a certain beauty and there's a certain poetic justice in in hitting them very, very close to that base just to show them that okay, two can play.
Exactly. The Prime Minister summed it up very well, that no nuclear black will no more work with us. So that
Exactly. This is nuclear blackmail.
uh, yeah.
Because the thing is that not only do they, whenever the going gets tough, they say, oh, we're going to pull out our nuclear card. I mean, first of all, this is not a joke. That is not something that anyone should be sort of wanting to play just because the going gets tough. If
uh,
your army general wants to openly talk about a two-state theory, he wants to talk about waging jihad on India, and I think to a great extent because the whole world has always hyphenated India and Pakistan, and India has been slowly and surely dehyphenating. Because how can you even compare the two countries? There is no match. It is not even an apples and oranges scenario. The differences couldn't be starker. I still remember that when the operations were going on, and there was this. I think one of these TV panelists. They happened to say something about Pakistan's IMF loan or something like that, and someone very jokingly said, "Oh, we can just buy through UPI." But I mean, that is the nature, that is the reality, and it is it is a tragedy that we have always been hyphenating these two nations just because Pakistan either plays that, oh, we have nuclear weapons, so we are going to use them, or their perpetual blackmail, which says that we are providing strategic depth against the terrorists in our country. So you have to help us safeguard these nuclear weapons because if they come in the hands of these rogue actors, you have no idea what kind of havoc they will unleash. Whereas everybody knows there is no dehyphenating the Pakistani government, the army, their intelligence services, their terror group, their state actors, they're non-state actors, they're rogue elements. By whatever word you want to call them, they are all literally the same. They have the same puppet master. They are one. They are not dehyphenated. They are very much hyphenated.
Correct, correct. So, before I, come to this wonderful point of yours about the Pakistani army and the non-state actors and the state actors, how the line blurs between them. So on this,
Right.
on this, like before I come to that, so there is one thing I want to, give out to the listeners. See, what the earlier point what Himja made about, how wonderfully all the system functioned. The air defense system of India, from drones to those guns, L-70 guns, which were modified to take down the swarm of drones, to Akash missile system. I think more than the S-400, it is actually those Indian systems which has performed,
Yeah.
fabulously well. And
Yeah.
the beauty is, that there is a command, there is something called integrated air command and control system, which is a digital nerve center, which has been developed by Bharat Electronics. That's an Indian company. Now,
Yes.
it takes the data from AWACS, Netra Civil Aviation Control, Mobile Observation post them together in a secure Air Force network, recognizes the real threats, enabling the commanders at the air headquarters and operational commander tactical division to monitor and respond to threats instantaneously. That means
Yeah.
IACCS coordinated 400 command centers, synchronizing defense like S-400, Akash, MRSAM, Spider systems. Now imagine you have a multi-protocol, system,
Yeah.
and it integrated with Army's Akash Tir system, which was used on 9th and 10th of May. So where we've absolutely neutralized the Turkish drones, and
Yes.
virtually, our bases, Pakistan can claim, nonsense, हमने उधमपुर पे मारा, we hit
That's fine.
Adampur, we hit
I
Udhampur.
mean,
But
Pakistan can claim a lot of things.
yeah,
It doesn't
correct.
matter.
Doesn't matter. But none of those damages were ever reported. So much so that even the grudgingly New York Times and Washington Post had to admit, oh boss, there is no image of Indian air bases being hit, but your 6 to 7 hits are at least confirmed and they are visible. And they are big creators, like especially in Rahim Yar Khan and Noor Khan. Right?
Yeah.
And
I
and
mean,
uh,
our
and
briefings
Bolari.
actually put out all the images
Yep.
for the whole world to see, and I think that has been another shift from the previous time. So that
Hmm.
has been very, very good. The
Correct.
narrative setting has been good.
Hmm.
And actually, there's another question I'd like to ask you.
Hmm.
That I believe even the navigation system this time I think was our own.
Yes, the navigation system was also our own. It was Navik. It was
Yes.
Navik. It was Navik what we use for the precision guiding,
Right.
guiding missile. And the best part is,
Hmm.
we have BrahMos, which goes at around, which is an Indian-Russian joint venture, which goes at around
Yes.
2.8 Mach, the speed of sound. And now we are
Hmm.
developing DRDO's hypersonic missile, right, which can go at,
Okay.
like 5 Mach speed, 5 times the speed of sound. And that is virtually impenetrable, and only very few countries in the world, Russia, America, China, have it. And once
Hmm.
that comes into Indian arsenal, so like,
Hmm.
even if you have the biggest of the aircraft, you have stealth, or you may have 18 AVAX, or you may get anything, JF-17,
Hmm.
J-10. But if you have the
Hmm.
first strike capability of disabling those airstrips, your
Yes.
air force is a sitting duck.
Correct. I mean, we saw that this time.
Yep, totally. So the use of scalp missile, the use of Rafale, the use of BrahMos, dummy, then is the Hirop drones by Israel. I think it was a wonderful display how India's military-industrial complex has actually come of age.
So there are two things, I want to mention here, and I'd like you to elaborate on them. The first thing is that I think this time we have seen that how the Indian Air Force in our territory, very much in safe territory, was able to target Pakistani bases from a distance quite comfortably, and how just just with the use of our missiles, it was literally like in front of the missiles, their jets, because because the radars were compromised, such high, very, very expensive birds, they were literally sitting ducks. So we saw that this time. That was another, and the fact that drones, they played a huge role this time. And, considering all this talk about Turkey in the country recently, uh, talk a little bit about how Turkey has played a role here.
Yep. I will come to that. I'll come to that. Okay. So,
Okay.
let me first, come back to the point what you made about the Pakistani military, because our viewers need to
Hmm.
understand what kind of a jihadist mindset runs deep. So, we saw
Hmm.
General Asim Munir, extol about the two nation theory, the religious war,
Yeah.
Ghazwa Hind, all that
Yeah.
stuff, but
Hmm.
what he invokes to attack, we are
Hmm.
not like Hindus, we are this, we are that. So people
Hmm.
need to understand that Pakistani military has actually captured the state since 1954, right?
Yes.
From
Yes.
so ever since General Ayub Khan, today an article has been published, Terror Incorporated, how Pakistani military hijacked the state on DD India. People can go and have a
Correct.
read. People can go have a read,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
which me and Himja researched together, and then we put it out, right? Okay,
The
so
terror industrial complex.
yes, exactly. The terror industrial complex, very well put up. Okay. So we talk about how the Fauji Foundation was put, which has subsidiaries. My God, have a look at this. For Fauji Fertilizer
Yes.
Company, Fauji Cement Company, Fauji Oil Company, Distribution Company, Aksari Bank. Then you have Army Welfare Trust, which control 25 commercial enterprises, general
Yeah, but
insurance.
I think I think, but for the benefit of our viewers, let's go back maybe even one step before. So,
Okay,
in the sense that yes, the Pakistani army and all their foundations facilitated it, yes. But the reality is that there is a mother node. The mother node, how did the army get so empowered? They got empowered because they were given funding for a certain job. The
true.
army said that they would use their skill set, for want of a better word, to maintain strategic depth.
Yep.
For them, the word strategic depth basically meant creation of terror groups.
Yes, absolutely.
What they were supposed to actually do was manage the terror groups. But the
True.
reality is that you're financing them to manage the same terror group that they have actually created. And this is one of the biggest jokes in the world. And the people that financed it, they did it because the terror groups were used to serve a certain purpose.
And
And then beyond the point, these groups, they were serving as their proxies for whatever purposes. And the Pakistani army, got so good at carrying them out in various places for various reasons that the funding increased, and then that resulted in all these foundations. And then once you get used to this kind of money, it's like tasting blood. Because let's be very, very clear about one thing. If the Pakistanis really cared a lot about the entire country, they would not be unfair to Sindh. They would not be unfair to the other provinces. When you talk about the Pakistani army, you are effectively just referring to Punjab. All the army is interested in is Punjab. Everything is only Punjab.
that's
Even recently, with the Indus Water Treaty being in abeyance, they are diverting water from Sindh.
absolutely.
So there,
They've been protest. Bilawal has been protesting on
yes,
road.
there have been protests. Yes, because for them, their entire thing is, oh, the farm. I mean, our farmlands in Punjab must not suffer. Whatever else can suffer, it makes absolutely no difference to us. So
Correct.
if the army is talking about, oh, we are so concerned about the country, well, that's let's not go there. They're only concerned about their own money. They're only concerned about profiteering.
Absolutely. And, and,
And
and
nobody wants these taps to run dry. It's a
true.
business of terror.
Correct. And
Pakistan has Pakistan is like, the way you have the Chinese manufacturing, they have the assembly set up. Pakistan has the assembly. They do assembly line manufacturing of terrorists. That is what they do.
of course. And we must not forget about it, that all this terror industrial complex, you know, systematically, though they were undertaking these activities in Operation Gibraltar as well, 1965, 1947, in form of those tribals, but this came into being an industrial complex only during the Afghan Jihad, when the Americans funded. The Hillary Clinton
Exactly.
has been in record in Senate. Oh, we funded Al Qaeda. We said, let's go in and defeat the Soviet Union and all that stuff. And then there was that Brzezinski, who was extolling those Afghan jihadis to
Yes.
fight the religious wars. And then there was Reagan, who invited those Afghan mujahideen to Oval Office.
Yes. He
1983.
legitimized them.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
legitimized them.
So
And
terror.
even after the fall of the Soviet Union, most of these nations that were under Soviet influence in the Middle East, whether it is Syria, whether it is a lot of other countries, they all got the same treatment.
Absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
back then, the Soviet Union existed. So the US, under the CIA, supposedly had a reason to say, we do not want countries that, or we think countries that are Soviet leaning are a problem. But please explain to me, after the Soviet Union, you know, uh, resolved in 1991, how was it still a problem?
See,
But
more
they did
the
not stop there.
correct.
This, so this became a way. This became a way of a way of their operations, and they did this in Syria. That's how ISIS was born. We have documented all of this in our book, and just what was it this week? I think earlier this week that
President Trump
the
met.
leader of Syria is now
Yeah,
yes, yeah,
Ahmad al Shara, whom President Trump met in Riyadh, and such a very
yes.
smart guy, a very handsome guy. I'm like, what is, like, quoting those
I mean,
hardened,
this
he has very
this would
tough
be
part.
as ridiculous as him inviting Osama bin Laden and actually passing a statement that he runs one of the best fighter flight training schools.
Yeah, no,
This is
this,
literally that ridiculous.
this is
This is the
literally.
theater of the absurd.
Uh, and which brings me to the whole, the end part. So, don't you think that there is a bigger ideological paradox which is happening, or alliance which is forming up in this? Like we discussed about this. Okay, so let's come to the
Mhm.
geopolitical part of it now. Okay, so
Okay.
okay, now you see, why do all these, be it Ahmad al Shara, his
Hmm.
organization is HTS. He's sponsored by
Hmm.
Turkey, and Turkey, we know, is the patron of Muslim Brotherhood ideology.
Yes.
And not to forget, a few months back, we saw these Hamas terrorists, again patrons of
Hmm.
the very same ideology. Okay, and
Yes.
Ahmad al Shara, whether it is a Zawahiri, whether it is a Bin Laden, they subscribe to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. And these Hamas terrorist group was seen in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, in Rawalkot, and then in Bahawalpur, right? Okay,
Yes.
where they extol, the blood will flow from Kashmir to Delhi.
Yes.
So there is kind of an axis, and then you had President Trump, virtually dealing up with, signing up with Qatar, which is one of the financiers of this ideology. Turkey,
Qatar
which is,
has always been.
yeah, Qatar has always been.
Qatar and Turkey. Yeah, I mean Turkey is Muslim Brotherhood. Basically, Turkey under Erdogan has always wanted to revive the Ottoman era, except their method of doing so has been using Muslim Brotherhood.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Right. So,
So
like,
they're using political Islam as a way of unification,
correct.
and
Revi-
and which is why
Reinvigorate in the caliphate dream. Yeah, that point to be noted. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I mean, but in a different way, using the political model, using democracy, and that is the precise reason why we started seeing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE embrace a lot more reforms, embrace modernism, because they do not want democracy to come anywhere near their doorstep, but they also do not want Muslim Brotherhood anywhere near their doorstep either.
Indeed. A point well noted. Which is why there has been a there has been a role change where these
Yes,
Gulf Arab monarchies are modernizing, and you see
yes,
Qatar, Qatar take over the role of being the financer, and Turkey taking over the role of the political patron. And somehow, if you would I to remind our audience over here, that you guys should read up the New Global Order book. It's available on Amazon. We've talked about the PhD 11, when how the Arab Spring was nothing but a plan to get Muslim Brotherhood regimes installed under the Obama administration, right?
yes,
And that Muhammad Morsi coup, the Syrian revolution, Tunisia, everywhere, even Gaddafi was taken down in Libya, and Muslim Brotherhood sprang up even there. So though it is
yes.
not in that strength, but it's still there. And then you had the
It hasn't been that successful in
correct, correct.
comparatively. Yes,
Correct. So you need to, this has been this probably, this pan-Islamic alliance which is forming between Turkey and Pakistan is a
yes,
very interesting play which is happening. And in between you have a crosshair called Iran, which like
yes.
which is not in sync with the ideology, right? And then you have the Israel angle also, playing up, where a nuclear deal is being negotiated, and you have those America negotiating a deal, and Netanyahu saying no, I'm going to go after Iran. This is an existential danger for me, right? And
Hmm.
while President Trump,
Pakistan, I mean, a nuclear Pakistan is not an existential danger. Imagine that.
imagine that, huh? But a nuclear Pakistan is not an existential danger. Pakistan is nothing but a suicide bomber with a nuclear button on its vest. Right?
Exactly.
Uh, you know,
Which it uses to blackmail at will.
yep. Totally. I
And
agree with
I
you.
think this is very interesting that this time around in our country, the top leadership is actually asking the very pertinent question, which I think the rest of the world also needs to start asking, that considering that Pakistan actually functions as an important node in the terror industrial complex by providing terror groups that you can rent basically as your proxy, and then uses the nuclear card, as its leverage, how safe are the nuclear weapons in Pakistan? That's a very,
Absolutely.
very pertinent question
Very,
with a lot of, yes, it is very, very important because any kind of a nuclear attack or any kind of a nuclear explosion impacts a significant portion of the world.
indeed.
In fact,
So,
if you remember,
hmm,
when at the fall of the Soviet Union, most of their satellites were asked to give up their nuclear weapons.
Ukraine was one of them. We saw,
Ukraine was
like
one of them.
Ukraine was one of them. So,
Yes. So, considering Pakistan's record, what business does the global community have in even letting it continue to have them?
exactly.
Are they even safe?
I
Do
don't
they not represent a threat to global humanity at large?
very you are raising a very pertinent question, like Pakistan's nuclear weapon as a threat to global peace and security. And this is why,
India does not have a first use doctrine. That's
yep,
very important.
yep,
A lot of countries don't have a first use doctrine. Tell me, which countries have a first use doctrine?
except Pakistan, no one does.
There you go. So you are basically saying that a country which is a rogue nuclear nation, which uses nuclear blackmail at will, which breeds terrorists for money, and has a first use doctrine is fit to hold these weapons
I
and
don't
risk the entire global population?
No, absolutely not. Oh, absolutely not. I totally
This
agree with
is the
you.
question everyone should really be asking.
Ab-
Everybody should be asking. This is
Absolutely.
the biggest talking point. No, Pakistan's use of terror is not a talking point. For them, this is normal. The entire world knows this. And had India responded earlier, a lot more people would be talking about it. I mean, for us, like I said, it was a long time coming. But now
Indeed.
that we have done this, and we have made, I mean, we have shown our evidence, we have made things very, very clear. And I think another wonderful thing that India has done this time, like was that we have now de-hyphenate. I mean, we have removed, that separation of Pakistan, the Pakistani army from their terror groups or whatever. Because every time Pakistan has carried out a heinous attack on our citizens, they have always said, "Oh, it wasn't us. It was
Ab-
non-state actors,
exactly.
non-state actors in court." This has been their favorite line. And after which we have just played the dossier game, and it hasn't got us anywhere.
True. And now, in the next part, we are going to come to the, since you have touched a very raw point, we want to talk to why there are so many powers playing suitors to Pakistan, what are their interests
Yes,
very quickly, and then we move on to the real reason, the real reason of this chaos in broader viewpoint, geopolitics, trade, and tariffs and manufacturing and restructuring of supply chain. So in the next part, we are going to discuss it. So we will just stay on. We're gonna just join us in. Yeah. Okay, welcome back, viewers. So, we're continuing our discussion with my friend Himja Parekh, who's there with me. So, we left off, Himja made a very interesting point about Pakistani army being, always trying to play the victim card and, trying to use as a rogue nation, trying to use nuclear weapons. So, probably the international community should pay. So, it's a very interesting point she's raised because now we know that there are many powers which want to, fund this agent of chaos or conflict at called Pakistan in the region. So who,
yes,
who are these powers? One we have talked about is Turkey. That Turkey is, giving drones, giving ideological support, Muslim Brotherhood. You have Turkey repairing F-16 planes. And
yes,
it's like giving an idol, the Muslim Brotherhood collaboration which is happening between Turkey and Erdogan was very open. When he said, okay, Shabaz Sharif, Pakistan is like my, a brotherly nation, and India has violated
yes,
its sovereignty, and all that stuff happened. And you saw what happened at the Delhi airport, that company with the Delhi airport,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
the,
Not just that, I mean, I believe the Turkish specialists were also training the Pakistanis for their drones.
hmm,
Their Turkish support extends very, very significantly towards towards Pakistan.
true, true.
And Turkey is, I think Turkey is seeing itself as an important node in what I'd like to call the terror industrial complex. Because if you remember, when I think a few years ago, when we were talking about Xinjiang in China and the Uyghur separation movement, it was Turkey. Turkey was responsible when we had the refugee crisis in Europe. That was also Turkey.
Absolutely.
So I think Turkey is also, so Turkey has a very interesting position because one, it enjoys a unique geographical advantage, which it has exploited. It's also a NATO ally. It provides one of the largest armies to NATO. And I think it sees itself as a sort of facilitator. Also, Erdogan has very, very large delusions of grandeur as far as reviving the Ottoman era is concerned. So in the terror industrial complex, I think Turkey sees itself as a significant facilitator. Pakistan is simply, like we said, it's simply the agent of chaos. It's the one that's actually providing the foot soldiers or the useful idiots, as we like to call them. But
Absolutely.
Turkey is the power behind it because Turkey brings with it, that industrial machinery. It brings with it, those specialists. It brings with it uh, greater backing, greater financing, greater access because it's also a part of NATO, a lot more things, and not to mention its ideological ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, all that other funding that comes with it. And of course, let's not forget the common link that they both have, the United States.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you summed it up well on Turkey, and I think we on our citizen side as well as the government, we need to take serious calls on Turkey, be it trade, be it civil aviation agreements, be it at some point we need to understand that as a self-respecting nation, we cannot
Yeah,
allow business to continue as normal for a country which is abetting, which is openly funding, abetting terror. And with those Turkish
yeah,
drone operators training, those drones which were
yeah,
launching the
yeah.
drones on Indian civilians, that's an act of war,
No,
technically.
not just that, but I think Erdogan has been very, very vocal about being in support of Pakistan despite all the evidence.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is,
So,
yeah,
so
continue.
this time, when the Indian government sort of changed the terms of the Indus Water Treaty, what our Prime Minister said is water and blood cannot mix. Similarly, terror and trade cannot mix.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
And I think that's a very long pending move. It should have been done long back.
yes, yes, yes.
So,
It is very important. It is important to take a stand. It is important to show that certain things are bigger, much more important than trade.
indeed, indeed, national
And if
security.
necessary, yes, national security, and sometimes you need to force countries to take a stand. At least this way you will know. Though of course in foreign policy there is nothing like a permanent friend or a permanent enemy. But for whatever it's worth, it's national interest at that point in time. But it is still at least that point in time. At least uh, though we are moving towards the era of multipolarity, but it is good to know who are your enemies. It is good to know who are the people you can have a transactional relationship with, and who are the people you should absolutely not trust.
Absolutely, very well said. Very. So after we've discussed Turkey. Let's move on to the bull in the China shop. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. The our dear neighbor on the east, right? Big neighbor on the east.
mm.
So, like
Yeah,
China has played a very, very duplicit and uh, a very murky role in propping up Pakistan, right? From,
yes, but they've also played very smart.
yep, both the sides. So, one,
Yes,
in the 1971 war, when India was cornered, it was Henry Kissinger had tried to, goad China to ingress into India so that Mrs. Gandhi could be cornered, and West
yes,
Pakistan could be saved. One is that history.
correct.
And right,
Yeah,
and then the second part is then from there on, when Pakistan started to develop its nuclear weapon program after India's test in 1974, so
yes,
it was the Chinese who provide enriched fuel, the blueprints, and they virtually, they were the ones who provided that AQ Khan network, where Mr. Khan got AQ Khan got the uranium fuel and the centrifuges designed from a Dutch lab. They were flagged by the MI6. Yet the German authorities and the Dutch authority did not do anything. And
yeah,
then you had the China providing M11 missile blueprints, JF-17,
yeah,
J-10C, CPEC versus
yeah,
CPEC invested of $62 billion. So
yeah,
technically, if today and with those HQ9 batteries, and now there's a talk of giving J35 as well, a stealth jet, which is a copy of F-35, by the way, right? So
yeah, yes.
technically it is China which is
For a
now,
country that is actually for a country that is actually bankrupt and needs the IMF to bail it out, this is interesting, is it not?
yes, very interesting. Which is very interesting that our dear neighbor is using Pakistan as an agent of chaos as an agent of containment on India.
Yeah,
So that India's rise as an economic power, as a manufacturing power, could be stunted, and both India and Pakistan stand hyphenated once again after
yeah,
more than decades of dehyphenation.
yeah.
So
But then also for China, it was necessary because with President Trump talking about setting up two supply chains, China was China was beginning to see a lot of their manufacturing getting diverted to a lot many countries, of which India would be one of the significant beneficiaries. And I think for them it was they felt that it was necessary to send out a message to the global community that it is not a very stable country, or maybe just to foment chaos, or just to basically maybe sow some seeds of doubt. For them, it was necessary because nobody will allow so much trade to be moved away. And we're not
Absolutely.
even talking about what is China's internal situation and the fact that this would significantly impact President Xi Jinping's image at home. And then if he were to give in very very easily to the reset, he would have to create some sort of aggression elsewhere, and that
Absolutely.
would also become a little problematic. But I mean, nevertheless, which is why during Pakistan's attack and what followed after, the Chinese maintained their duplicity the way they always have. They didn't come out openly and say anything, though their actions were always indicating something. But openly, they kept very quiet. They didn't do anything. And now, as we see, the Eastern Front, they're trying to slowly activate, which was only expected.
Correct. Totally. And the beauty of it is, because you remember, that when President Trump was about to get elected, China withdrew from Ladakh. Okay,
Yeah,
that Depsang. And we understood,
yeah.
okay, because they were thinking, okay, we are going to go, we are going to go into a trade war, so they needed the Indian market, so that is why they
Hmm.
thought to withdraw. But the and
Yeah,
but look at the coincidence of the timing. The day India took out 11 Pakistani air bases, it is on the very
yeah.
same date that US and China entered into a trade deal.
You know why?
You,
Do you know
okay,
why?
yeah, tell me.
What do two countries that may hate each other on the surface hate more?
A third country who can challenge both of them.
Yes. In that case, their hatred gets united and
Absolutely.
diverted towards.
Yeah. So what we call is, and that we can call the G2 consensus, America and China
Yes.
consensus. Okay, we let the world divide between us, but we do not allow a third person to come and eat our share of market.
Yes. Yes, because even previously in the first Cold War between the US and USSR, there was never a hot war. You
Absolutely.
will never see them fight directly.
Absolutely.
And and in the new Cold War, which is going to be between the US and China, you are still not going to see a hot war. It's not possible. What you're going to see is, they're going to fight via their proxies.
Very
So
nice.
this
Yeah.
is expected.
Hmm. Now, so the Chinese, we know, to sum up, for our viewers over here, or for our
Hmm.
audience over here. So what we have seen in Operation Sindoor and this whole geopolitical play in Indo-Pak, skirmishes or conflict, whatever you may call it, you have
Yeah.
the United States, which was bankrolling Pakistan through IMF loans and the military aid. Military aid
Yes.
of $400 million in February for F-16s. Then IMF loan just bang in the middle when we were in the conflict. And then you have another story breaking out that one of President Trump team had gone to Pakistan, met with the family of General Munir, and they had a crypto investment over there. In their
America has always been a transactional trade obsessed country. So this should
Absolutely.
not be surprising for anybody. What was that line? Being an enemy of the United States is bad. Being a friend is fatal.
Yes, Henry Kissinger said that. And to sum it
Yes,
up,
Henry.
to sum it up in one line, America can be a good business partner, but they're definitely not an ally. Like,
But but there are very rarely uh, all-weather allies in foreign policy. I mean, India has been fortunate to have two relatively. I think it's Russia and Israel have been there.
yep,
Russia has been there for us,
yep,
and we have also tried to be there for Russia as and when possible. But, and they were also very very supportive currently. So that has been good. That is something that we must always keep in mind, and I think we have always kept that in mind. But having said that, um, we must also be cognizant that the current situation also makes it easy for them to be on our side.
Absolutely. More than that, like Russia has been on side, though they were hosting President Xi when this was going on, and they have developed a good
Yes,
relationship with China. But they
yes,
continued the supply of arms irrespective. They returned the
yes,
favor what we had given them during the Ukraine war and sanctions, when we were
yes,
buying their oil and making their economy chug along. India and China were two
yes,
powers which made the Russian economy stay afloat during all these years,
exactly.
right?
Yes,
And
yes,
then you have Israel, which has provided, given us drones, which has given us those surveillance mechanism, which has worked in Barak 8 systems, which has again helped us. And probably one of the
yes,
one of, and these two were also present in the Kargil war, 1999.
yes,
Let's not even forget that.
yes,
And then
yes,
the third power, which has not exactly been an ally, but even during the Cold War was with India, despite being a NATO partner, was France to a
yes.
certain extent. Because it was during this war that for that. What is the difference between the France and America is, like we got the Rafale M deal, that naval jet deal with the France got done in last couple of weeks. I think that was one of
Yes.
the biggest sore points to American foreign policy and military industrial complex. But unlike the American system, which come with strings attached, oh, you cannot use this for this, you cannot use this for this. The French system do not come with those conditions attached.
Yes.
Be it we have used Mirages, we have used Jaguars, we have used Rafales, in last one couple of years. And I think, the French have also proven to be a consistent supplier, a consistent military industrial complex, which has helped India grow technically.
That is true because I think the American MO has always been to move India away completely from any non American equipment, which is why I think they go to great lengths to ensure that you are not able to integrate that equipment. So this
Correct.
way you really have no choice. It's almost like in very simple parlance to say it's an Apple versus Android thing. If you're using one ecosystem, they want you to only be a part of that ecosystem, which is not always possible. If a country wants that to happen, they need to be a reliable ally, not a very transactional one. So that
Absolutely.
actually makes things a little difficult. And I think this is the one thing that has turned a lot of countries against the United States. This is precisely why the Middle East is suddenly so hot. And I think a part of the relationship that India and Israel share, I think Israel understands what it's like to constantly have terror on your borders, and Israel understands loyalty and reliability. So I
True.
think that has been another uniting force. And like I said, with Russia, of course, we have an old relationship. So I mean that one has stood the test of time relatively,
Absolutely.
and uh, and the French have been accommodating, and I think we have reciprocated.
True.
And
True.
in fact, I think this French relationship is also going to come in handy uh, when we move to the next part. That is when we talk about the entire
Trade deal
global
part.
dynamics of,
Yep.
yes, the trade deal part. How a good relationship with the European Union is necessary, considering the very transactional nature of the United States that we are seeing under the Trump presidency.
Great. That's a good point. I'll just quickly run through a one small portion, and then we move on to the final
Sure.
part of it. Okay. So
Yeah.
now the thing is that the French part is very interesting. Let me let frame it for the listeners. The Americans never got along with the French. They have a very big history. Like you
Yes.
saw them fight in AUKUS about Australian submarine deal. Charles de Gaulle had a very bad relationship with Americans.
Yes.
He withdrew from NATO,
Yes.
right? So they've been at loggerhead.
Yes.
Like the French are usually balked at American exceptionalism, right? And
Which is why U.S. Long-standing U.S. foreign policy has always been to maintain a divided Europe, because a
well,
united Europe is detrimental to
yeah,
Anglo-Saxon interests.
absolutely. And this brings me to the another point. Like you had so many that Western outer going, oh, your Rafale has fallen, your Rafale has fallen, your Rafale has fallen, all that.
Where's the
And
proof?
And that was probably because the US military industrial complex was trying to have target the French commercial or military industrial complex in guise of this Indo-Pak conflict. Your viewers need to
Obviously.
really need to and you know what they conveniently hide. You know
Yes.
why they want to target the all those claims of targeting Rafales were bogus, by the way. You know, like and rather it has been proved that the Chinese system actually interception failed. The Indian government showed out, you know, that how we jammed the Chinese system and we hit the Pakistani
Yes.
bases, and the Rafale news turned out to be a false news by the Western media propaganda. But the Americans do not, you know, want to highlight that they've lost 7 MQ-9 drones to Houthi militias, who's not even a state, for $30 million
Yes.
each. They've lost, they
In the
almost,
first month,
in the
in
first
the
month.
in the first in the first 30 days, President Trump announced a supposed ceasefire with the Houthis that are not even a proper militia, but have actually inflicted so much pain, so
Yep.
much pain,
Yes.
just in 30 days.
Yes. American F-16 F-35 fighters were nearly struck. F-18 Hornets virtually crashed from that aircraft carrier. And the wonderful beauty, today only when we were recording, a news came, and I was, researching it through. They had given 10 F-16s to Ukraine, right?
Yes,
And then out of that, very interestingly, one was lost by to a friendly fire from Patriot missile system. Second was
yes,
lost one S-400 by Russia. And third was
yes,
lost today to a Geran 2 drone by Russia, which is a version of Iran's Shahid 136 drone. Now you imagine you're losing your biggest, you know, the asset, the biggest fighter in your armory, F-16s,
yes.
to
It's
Russian
very
S-400.
embarrassing.
Embarrassing
It's
S-400s.
very, it's very, very embarrassing. I think Operation Sindoor and the events, and of course what the Houthis did and what you're talking about today. But Operation Sindoor, it was the start of really setting the cat among the pigeons, because what we saw was two long-standing military industrial complexes that were talking about selling their prized products to so many countries at such a premium suddenly looked so vulnerable. And that
Uh,
is very, very embarrassing. It is
exactly.
very,
Very
very embarrassing.
embarrassed. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand one thing. So, or, you know, never believe something which is on the face value, and always research. You know, like if Rafael has been targeted, what is the purpose? If this is happening, always look the other side and find a reason for it. Now, also, you know, to culminate this portion about Sindoor and the players and geopolitical part, so, in sum and substance, we saw a new India emerge which went from strategic restraint to sovereign retaliation, which stopped
Hmm.
looking out for validation from the West. We don't need to
That's
think
very
of,
important. It's a very, very important point to make, that
yep,
we have stopped looking for validation, and this is something we must continue.
yes, we stopped sending dossiers. We know Pakistan is being abetted by various powers, China, Turkey, funded by America. Then there are Azerbaijan also, which supported. Then there was Malaysia, who also gave a wishy-washy statement. So there are many
Yes.
suitors as an agent of chaos. But now we come to the real deal. We need to find out what is behind this whole chaos, from Iran, from Bandar Abbas to Gwadar to Pahalgam to Coup in Bangladesh to chaos in Myanmar. You know, I would want you to talk about, you know, what is behind this ring of chaos which is now beginning to emerge in Indo-Pacific.
Okay. So, when we were researching for our book, and we went back so many centuries, and we looked at so many royal empires, and then we saw empires turn into democracies, countries emerge, the, you know, uh, the creation of Pakistan, so on and so forth, the fall of the British Empire. What was the one thing that we discovered is common in all wars?
Commercial interest and trade.
All wars are only about one thing, which is trade.
Yep, true.
All wars are only about trade. Doesn't matter whatever ideology you may use. Ideology may be the reason. In some cases, it's ideology. Some cases, it is religion. Some cases, it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter however you spin it. If you scratch it hard enough and deep enough, there will be a link of trade, control, and power.
Absolutely.
During the British time, it was navigation, which is why it was the British Navy that controlled everything. When it was time for America to enter, that was during World War II. What was the condition? Britain would have to give up her colonies,
Absolutely
and
right.
that resulted in the rise of the American Empire. And today, just the way Britain was once controlling the seas, America has been exercising freedom of navigation of the seas, which China then started threatening in recent times. So
Abs-
all wars have always been about trade. And as far as the US is concerned, not only is the US sitting on a trade deficit, which is very, very normal considering its status as a reserve currency, but it is also sitting on a huge, huge debt problem.
a debt of $34 trillion. Yep.
You know, for which it is individually responsible. No one else is responsible for it.
Correct.
There is only so long that you can continue exporting your country's inflation globally to other countries so that your citizens can continue living an exalted standard of living at lower cost and continue printing money without it coming back to bite you.
That was a
Beyond the
dollar.
point, it is not going to hold.
Yep. And that was the dollar system, which was put for pegged to
Yeah,
gold. Then the Nixon removed it from gold, and it went to petrodollar, and then started the treasury washing machine. Like the money circulation machine began. Start investing in the
yeah,
treasuries, and then you had the
yeah,
Japan, the Chinese, who were once the biggest holders, and today the news came,
yeah.
like that UK is now a bigger treasury holder than China. China has come down to number three. So from $1 trillion, China has come down to $700 billion. That's a huge
Yeah,
fall. 30% of treasury is gone.
because
Yeah,
because you know what doesn't devalue? Commodities, real assets don't devalue. This is
gold,
paper currency. One
gold.
that you're, yes, I mean, that's what I said, commodities, any
Yeah,
commodity that is real.
yeah. True,
I
true.
mean, it may go through its cycles, but it is not going to lose value.
Indeed,
Unlike a
indeed.
paper currency that you print at will
True. So,
and you determine its value.
like I have a point of view. I have a point here to put out. So technically,
Okay?
we saw that US was running trade deficits to preserve dollar.
It,
They
it needs
had
to. It
correct.
needs to.
It is to preserve the dollar hegemony. So when the US president said, "Okay, look, now I
No,
want
no, no.
to,"
It needs to do that. It needs to do that so that the dollar remains the global reserve currency. That is
correct,
the condition for
correct. So
it. Right.
if the US president said, "Look, I don't want to maintain those trade deficits," doesn't it cut at the very
Hmm.
root of its hegemony? That it does technically. So now what happens is, so the President Trump,
Hmm.
when he came, he said his fundamental the Besant plan, what we talked about,
Hmm.
that was
Yes.
about, okay, that was about one, America has to reindustrialize and remanufacture. One, two.
Yes.
The American debt, which is now due for renewal, about $7 trillion, has to be renewed,
Yes.
and for that, the interest rates have to be lowered, right? Because the bond yields are high at around 4.5% at this minute, right?
The cost of servicing it is unsustainable.
Unsustainable, despite Dodge and all the cuts. You need $1 trillion just to pay the interest, which is crazy, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I
And
mean they're actually coming up with new gimmicks, to hold on to money. I believe there was this news floating around today that they are looking at even taxing overseas remittances now.
exactly. And that gold card thing, this remittance thing, all these are, they're trying to find new, invent new ways of, getting money into the coffers so that
Yes.
their
Yeah.
debt could be, and then going on to the tours of Middle East from Qatar, trying to get 500 million, 500 billion, 500 billion, 1 trillion commitments in sovereign
Yes.
wealth funds.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And then there was that asset monetization plan of the sovereign wealth fund of the US. I don't know whether it's taken off or not, but
Hmm.
the viewers need to understand that when this plan was put up, the President Trump introduced tariffs. He said, okay, I'll tariff China 150%, India 26%,
Hmm.
Japan
Hmm.
25%, Korea 20. So all these five countries, China, Japan,
Hmm.
Korea,
Hmm.
Vietnam,
Hmm.
India, and Bangladesh. These were the manufacturing arc. They were the prime manufacturing powers in the East. And I guess this is
Yes.
after a century that the manufacturing, has shifted to the East. The East has a products in hand, while America is kind of an hollowed out economy running on a dollar scheme as reserve currency with just services and high end manufacturing, high tech manufacturing of technology goods. Am I right to sum it
Yes.
up?
Yes. Yes.
So, so now this brings us to the next point. If now when Donald Trump says, okay, I want to reindustrialize, I want to
Yes.
maintain the dollar hegemony, and I am going to target. I am going to put the tariffs on these countries. So these countries
Yes.
need to basically deindustrialize for America to reindustrialize. That is what he's asking for technically.
Yes. That is what he's asking. I think he's gone about it in a very, very terrible manner.
Yep. Totally right. And this is why even countries like Japan have badly blown up. And who knows better than Japan? You know what they did in the 1970s and 80s during the Plaza Accord and in the 45. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, Japan was forced to devalue, and after that, Japan had to maintain a deflationary policy for a very, very long time. And
correct.
finally, now that they have, after decades, now that they have reversed their policy, why should they be in a mood to take the hit for the US dollar again? No one
Exactly.
will do that.
Exactly. And the
So I
Japanese,
think,
yeah,
I think what is terrible about this thing, the premise was not actually wrong. With the rise of, I mean, basically the new Cold War between US and China, the world was anyway looking at two parallel systems, two supply chains emerging.
true,
There could have been a very, very clear US led supply chain, China led supply chain.
true,
And all the countries that were probably heavy manufacturing, powerhouses in the East that were US allies could have easily been part of the US supply chain, could have enjoyed reciprocal trade advantages, and the US could have stuck to doing its high tech manufacturing, technology, financial services, other services. Other countries would have provided to be a back end, either for manufacturing, assembly manufacturing, mid level manufacturing, mid to high level manufacturing. And it could have actually turned out to be a wonderfully well oiled machine. There would have been two formidable supply chain.
but
Only
rather,
had he decided to be a little rational and reasonable about it. And when he did all this, what I find very, very strange is, did he even, I mean, did the government even think about the fact that, do Americans really want to work in these assembly level jobs for minimum wage? Are they
absolutely,
even willing? Do they even have the mindset?
the
And instead, what he has done is he has pushed countries into such a corner that the EU, which has typically never gone against the United States, has chosen to do so.
right.
Other countries have been very, very angry. And I don't even think he sat and calculated that if he were to actually impose these kind of crazy tariffs on countries that are considered allies or part of the US led supply chain, things are just going to get so expensive for their consumers, for the US consumers at home, the ones that are used to receiving the same goods at much cheaper prices, because China was manufacturing them for a very, very long time, and the US was actually exporting their currency inflation overseas.
Absolutely. You know,
What is going to be the impact when the same product, okay, you can have a made in America tag, and that's great, but when your country is reeling under inflation, when people cannot afford to pay their mortgages, when they cannot afford to pay their rent, when the cost of food is so high, how long can you sustain? I am so proud because I'm wearing a t-shirt which says made in USA instead of made in China.
yes. And there was a statistic that made in India iPhone would cost $1,000, and a made in
Yes.
America iPhone would cost $30,000. And then President Trump just recently said to Tim Cook, "Look, I do not want you to manufacture in India."
Okay. That's fine. And what does Mr. Cook have to say about that? Does he think he'll be able to sell a $3,000 iPhone?
Absolutely not. The US
Or
companies will. So, which brings me to the next point. Which brings me to the next point. So, you have these bifurcation of supply chain, which could have easily happened. But instead, what
yes.
America did was it went about going about blowing up allies, targeting their
Hmm.
very own industries, rather than tying
Yes.
up with them for knitting it into a perfect, well-oiled machine, as you just said. So,
It tried to be a bully. It tried to be a bully instead of being a partner. It forgot the world is not what it used to be, and the US is not what it used to be.
correct. It is no more a unipolar world. That era is
It is
gone.
no it is no more a unipolar world. It is just the way when the way India reacted this time, and a lot of countries took notice globally because India behaved what traditionally out of character. The US never thought India would be this aggressive. The US expected India to just, roll over and bend. The US also expected Europe to completely succumb to its bullying. EU didn't do that. Japan didn't do that. India hasn't done that.
Correct. And now to that point, on the India point, I'll quickly come and then we wind it up. On India point, that you have the US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and you have Scott Bessent, who are negotiating. Oh, they want India to, virtually give up non-trade barriers, like your agriculture subsidies, your pharma patents, or even what do you say, your data localization, your e-commerce rules. I think the government of India has played really well. They have said point blank, the strategic verticals, the data sovereignty, the food security of India, the pharmaceutical patents which or the laws which we have to protect the generic drugs in India, that will not be diluted to favor the American corporates or American agro businesses. There are certain red lines which should never be crossed. Yes, you can reduce tariffs. Like auto tariffs can be reduced to maybe 10%, or other tariffs can come down. And I think a tariff deal will likely happen very soon. Maybe not now, in a couple of weeks or in a month, we'll have it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
there are certain strategic sectors which India must never give up. It's as simple as
So
that.
that is true. That is true. And even in the sectors where they are talking about tariffs, you cannot come in with the approach of being a bully and just expect that people will agree because you're the United States.
Absolutely agreed. So, now coming to the final part of it, now, just concluding it for our listeners, we've discussed so much from trade war to Operation Sindoor and everything. That's just to make sense of broader picture. So a broader
Yes.
picture is that there is a hegemon called America, which is facing a trade deficit, which has got its rating downgraded by Moody's today, by the way. As
Yes.
we
Yes.
speak, right? That's a very important
Historical.
historical point. So we have
Isn't
all
it? Don't you actually feel like we are just in the fifth month of the year and we have seen,
crazy
we are
amount of.
literally witnessing history being made? Yeah, there's so much that has already happened and it's only May.
Yep, that's it. So we have a hegemon which is desperately trying to save its empire. And that hegemon is
Yes.
willing to go to any extent to save its empire, willing to light conflicts in Iran, in Pakistan, target China's Belt and Road, poke
Yes.
India with an agent of chaos in Pakistan, then, do coups in Bangladesh, then chaos in Myanmar, then probably maybe in the future we'll see things happening in Southeast Asia, because Vietnam,
Yes.
Japan, and South Korea have tied up with China in doling out loans with ASEAN in renminbi, which is a very unique thing. And then you have the whole a global shift happening where China has deployed, its own digital Silk Route, ECNY, KIPS, its own financial architecture, its own AI, its own AI models. So we have, a kind of a bifurcation of supply chains, one power trying to protect, targeting the Asian manufacturing houses to save its power. And then you have bipolarity emerging. And then you have the third pole of India, Russia, UAE, and the Gulf Arab nation, which is like multipolarity within bipolarity. Now, you please finish
Yes,
up.
yes, yes. Well, because see, first of all, the US has enjoyed the status of being the sole hegemon for a very, very long time.
Yep.
No country likes to become irrelevant. Everyone fears irrelevance.
Yep.
Though at the
Correct.
same time, there is an unspoken that there has always been an unspoken rule that nothing is permanent.
Ab-
All big empires must fall.
Absolutely.
The United Kingdom is not even a shadow of what it used to be. So all empires that rise must fall, and that is
Absolutely.
going to happen too for the US to go from being the sole hegemon to a part of uh, bipolarity in itself is a step down because it is
Abs-
no longer the sole custodian of the world as it likes to consider itself to be.
Perfect.
And now, along with the fact,
Yeah. Tell.
okay, so I mean, as we were talking, that every empire, once it rises, there is going to be a fall. So for the United States, of course, after being the sole hegemon, now to be part of a two polar world or a bipolar world as we are talking is obviously a fall. But this is a reality. This is what's going to happen. And because the nature of the world today is a lot more globalized than what it was during the previous Cold War, this time we are actually seeing multipolarity in bipolarity. Also,
Uh,
the fact that we are also going through the fourth industrial revolution, which means the Middle East becomes important, data becomes important, India becomes important. So so we're going to see few countries that are important enough to leverage themselves to be part of maybe both the supply chain, or they'll be in a position to dictate their terms, and then there'll be those countries that are going to be forced to be a part of one particular supply chain in their totality.
Absolutely. I agree with you totally
What
over
do you
there.
think?
I think I more or less agree, and I guess we've written on the same lines on our platform Niti
Yes,
Shastra as well in detail.
yes,
No, we've covered the
yes.
bifurcation of supply chain, energy, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals. We've covered this all. So in sum, and like I let me sum it up for my the audience or the listeners. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, so we have a trade war going on, which was ignited in
Yes,
the month of March, April. We
yes,
already had a Ukraine war in 2022, which led to a commodity reset, right?
yes,
Technically. Over,
yes,
over and above that, we had a trade war beginning when President Trump came. And now we have
yes.
various geopolitical theaters erupt. We had the Israel Gaza theater erupt. We had the Syrian theater erupt in between. Then we had the coup in Bangladesh. Then we already have chaos in Myanmar. Now we have Israel Iran conflict, which is on the horizon because of the nuclear program. Then in
So
between
these are all subsets, no?
these
They're
are
all
sub
basically subsets of
uh,
the same reset of the supply chain that is in the making. How
correct.
else, if two countries are not going to have a hot war, if they are not going to confront each other directly, the confrontation will happen via proxies.
So
And you're going to have both sides pressurizing these countries to basically take some sort of a stand. And that
ex-
is what we see happening. Even what happened in India was nothing else. It was the US trying to force India into taking a bigger stand than India was willing to.
yes.
Isn't that right?
Right, because had India entered into a hot conflict, a full scale war with Pakistan, right, instead of the
Yes,
limited action which we have taken, targeted, precise action,
yes.
probably the other big bully in the region, China, might have also entered, and that would have put India's detente with China in question, and possibly then Washington could have enjoyed. that leverage over India and said, okay, like
Yeah.
come to us. What do you want? We'll help you. We'll help you with F-35. We have Limoa. We have Comcasa. And our listeners should remember, it was the Indo-China conflict in 2000 or the standoff in Doklam in 2017 that America leveraged its position to get Comcasa signed, the
Yes.
foundational
Yes.
agreement. So if this Indo-Pak thing or in this Indo-Pak standoff had converted into a larger regional conflagration between three powers, three nuclear powers in the region, or in Jammu and Kashmir, or the border wars. Even if China would not have moved into India, but had just taken an aggressive posture on the border, that would have thrown away India's detente with China to winds, and knowing that certain industries of India are still dependent upon Chinese supply chains for raw materials, that would have caused us a big issue. And then finally, India would have been forced to, catapult to the American camp, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, we could have been forced to make certain compromises. We were unwilling.
Yes. So technically, by avoiding a full-scale war and going for a kinetic targeted action of sovereign retaliation, we have
Yeah.
not only escaped that trap which was set for us, we have probably
Yeah.
even maintained our strategic autonomy in the region, which is not, which is, like itching United States. Why this has happened? Because what they thought, rather the counter result is going to be that India is now, say, after US's hypocrisy being exposed in the Pakistan during the bailouts and
Yeah.
military aid and all that stuff, saying, okay, do whatever you want to. And the moment Pakistan started getting hammered, US came in, oh, no, 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 please stop it, please stop it. That kind of hypocrisy, and how President Trump tried to usurp the credit and saying, look, I got the
Yeah.
mediation done, right? So
See,
this,
creating any kind of an economic unrest type of situation in India was always going to be beneficial to both the US and China. For China, it was going to help countries feel a little insecure about moving their entire supply chains to India as far as manufacturing was concerned. For the US, uh, it was helpful to contain India. And in
absolutely.
containing India, they could have extracted better concessions from us, the ones that they have anyway been trying for.
Yes,
So for both of them, it was to their advantage. I think the US did not expect India to react the way we did, and uh, and then which is why a lot of people, when they were very surprised at the US bailout of Pakistan, IMF, US, same difference.
yeah,
When they bailed them out, it was not surprising. I mean,
absolutely.
for us, it was not surprising at all. It was. It could have been shocking considering the clearly terror supporting nature of Pakistan. I mean, the timing could not have been worse, but the US actions were unsurprising.
Absolutely,
But then
absolutely.
for India, I think it was great because it was a very, very good reality check in understanding that though we have no choice in principle, because if we have to choose between the US and China in a bipolar world, we will have no choice but to go with the US because Chinese foreign policy will never permit us to be friends with our neighbors, and neither will Niti Shastra permit us to do the same. So we have no choice in principle but to ally with the United States. But we will also have to make sure that we are able to do that, maintaining our strategic autonomy. It does not mean that our independence, our sovereignty is up for sale. We are not
Abs-
here to be a colony or a vassal state of the United States.
Absolutely. A point very well noted.
I mean, it is wonderful to have, yes, it is wonderful that two big democracies come together and set fantastic examples of what humanity can achieve if they put their great ideas together. But if one decides that they want to completely bully the other into surrendering using all possible tools of coercion, then that is not a great way to build a partnership.
Absolutely. Agreed. Agreed. So one final line, I like to, end this podcast with, and for our listeners.
Okay.
Like every country has a civilizational memory. Okay.
Yes.
The Chinese haven't forgotten the century of shame, the opium wars, right?
Yes.
They are here to avenge that. The Japanese
Yes.
haven't forgotten their humiliation of pacifist constitution in 45. Then what happened? The lost decades plus the Plaza Accord in 1980s, right?
Yes.
Think,
Yes.
right? The Europeans haven't forgotten
Yes.
how the Americans ripped them off post the World War II. Giving them into
Yes.
submission, using NATO as a tool. And similarly, the
One
Indians.
must not forget history. Those who forget their history are doomed to repeat.
Correct. Similarly, the Indians also must not forget that we were also
Yes.
ripped off by trade by East India Company. We were also once
Yes.
colonized by these imperial powers, and it was through trade. It was not through military. Military came later on. It was earlier trade.
Yes.
And which is why every war has trade and commercial interest beyond it, whether be it East India Company or anyone. And which is why going ahead, India will have to be very careful in dealing with America on trade terms. Do not surrender your sovereign
Yes.
critical sovereign verticals, and maintain your strategic autonomy. All said and done, I think this Sindoor episode has turned out to be a blessing in disguise for a country.
Yes.
Not only it has given us
Yes.
national unity, it has given a new military doctrine of sovereign retaliation over strategic restraint. It has
Yes.
highlighted that India was able to send a message across to the world that look, no more the nuclear. You cannot use a nuclear umbrella as a tool to carry out illegitimate, dastardly terror attacks, and that cannot be tolerated in any.
Without fearing consequences. If
Yes,
you do that, there will be consequences.
absolutely. And I think this new doctrine which India has embarked on, this is why from London to Brussels to Washington to Beijing to Ankara, the world capital nothing but witness a earthquake of a Richter scale of virtually 9 on the 10th of May,
Yes.
when those Pakistani air
Yes.
bases were taken out. And
Yes.
that Pakistan's nuclear
Yes.
bust was called. So that is where
Yes.
it I
And and
yeah. Continue. Your your
I
your,
think it
fi-
is.
your
I
final
think it
words.
is.
Yeah.
No, no. I don't really have any closing points. I think you have summed it up very well. But yes, I mean, I would just like to say one thing. It is nice to see baby Simba roar. That is it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Simba has finally discovered his roar and is
Yeah.
about to avenge, what you say,
Mufasa.
Mufasa, right? To that, and take on the battle to Scar. I remember that quote. So on that note,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you, India.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
thank you.
Thank
And
you. It's been a pleasure.
yep. And to our listeners, we really hope that you subscribe to our to our channel, like, share the
Yes.
podcast, and we'll hopefully bring more such rich content to you in the near future. Thank you so much. Thank you, Imja. Thanks you once again for joining us.
Yes. Niti Shastra is all about giving out the Indian narrative. And I think Operation Sindoor has taught us that we must support and encourage everything that is indigenous and stop seeking Western validation. This is our attempt to put out the Indian narrative. We are very, very thankful and grateful for all your support, and we hope that you will continue to encourage us. Thank
Correct.
you.
It's about blending the Indian wisdom with statecraft. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you once again for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Thank you. Bye.